Do you aspire to be a woman who stands in her power, unapologetic for her success, and unwilling to compromise on her standards, values, and goals? Welcome. This is the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where Angela Gennari speaks with extraordinary women who are breaking barriers, shattering glass ceilings, dominating their sports, and rising to the top of their industry. It's time to step into your power.
Thank you for joining us today. We have Miss Christele Parham with us from Macon Black Tech and HamTECH Solutions, and we are so excited to have you here. I know that you will be an incredible source of inspiration because I have read your story and I have learned about you, and you are an extremely exceptional woman. So I am so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. So we are going to talk a little bit about how you got here, and you know that you were born in Haiti. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yes, I was born in Haiti.
So what brings you here? When did you come here? Tell me about your journey.
Okay, so pretty much I grew up in Haiti, and at the age about 11 or 12, I moved to the United States. Actually moved in South Florida.
Okay.
Lived in Broward County and Dade County for a few years, and 7 years ago I moved to Macon. So what brought me here, I guess it's not a glamorous story. When I was growing up, my mom and dad, they were in the middle of separating, but also there was a lot of political unrest, and for safety, they had me go to South Florida.
Okay, good, good. And so you are very entrepreneurial right now. You
Yes.
have a very incredible career. And have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yes, actually, entrepreneurship is growing up in Haiti. I grew up watching my great aunt. She owned the only bookstore / library in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And my grandparents from my mom's side lived in the country. My grandfather was the only auto parts store for miles in the city that they lived in. My grandpa and my grandma, they actually, most of their kids were entrepreneurs. My uncle was an engineer to the president, and my grandma was also an entrepreneur. So I pretty much saw it all around me. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know when.
Yeah. Well, It's incredible that you've had that kind of influence in your life, because what a great role model set that you've had, women and men.
Yes.
Which is incredible, because it's so rare, especially with your grandmother being an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And how amazing is that? So you really you were able to envision it as a child, whereas I think a lot of girls, especially young, we can't envision that for ourselves just yet. We don't have as much of that influence in our lives. And so that's incredible that you did. And it's no doubt of why you've become as successful as you are. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, good for you. Yes. And I know that you've got a great work ethic, because you are running multiple businesses right now.
Yes.
So you definitely stay busy.
Not on my own, but doing my best. Yes. It's not a glamorous story, but we're doing our best.
I'd love to hear about HamTECH Solutions. So you are in a very specific space of HIPAA regulations and cybersecurity. So talk about male-dominated space. I mean, you are really just driving tech in some of the most tricky waters that you could be in, because, I mean, it's very highly regulated, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, thank you for asking. So pretty much with HamTECH Solutions, we are in Macon, and we service a lot of the local smaller practices. We have some clients in Atlanta as well, and North Dakota. That's the random one. Not random, but geographically random.
Right.
But yeah, what we do is, first, when we first started as new business owners, we're doing is anything. We were doing IT and things of that sort. But when life got a little busier, we decided to go into HIPAA management and specialize in it only. It is heavily growing. So also a little bit of background for me, and even for my husband, and how we ended up in that field. My husband was doing it full time as an employee, but also my background's actually in accounting.
Okay.
And I was doing auditing at a local hospital, and then later on moved on to become a contractor in the innovation department. That's one of my favorite places that actually kind of led me to go full-time into full-time entrepreneurship. Yeah, so as we started working in that space, we realized that we were already, based on the experiences that we were building, we were navigating into being very niche.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's incredible. And you started the company with your husband when? How long ago?
So, fun fact, we didn't even know. We were just friends at the time, actually. I helped pick out the name.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then little did I know this was going to be, like our family business. But yeah, and what happened was, as Arian is my husband's name, we were working full time, both of us, and he started working more hours, and we had just gotten married. Mm-hmm. So one of us needed to quit first. He quit first because my insurance was the best in the city.
Yes.
Yes, and then later on I quit.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And the company is how old now?
We've had the company since 2012. What's the math on that?
Ooh, about 10 years.
Okay, yes. Yes, so about 10 years.
Awesome.
Yes.
Nice. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's great because, as entrepreneurs, one of the biggest achievements is getting past that 1 year mark.
Yes.
And then they say 5 years is the next big milestone.
Mm-hmm.
And so 10 years is tremendous. So good for you. That's
Thank
amazing. You. Good. And then more recently, you started a incubator accelerator called Macon Black Tech. Mm-hmm. Tell me what drove you into that.
Well, yeah, thank you. So pretty much Macon Black Tech started because we, being in Macon, although like I shared with you that my family in Haiti were entrepreneurs, moving away when I moved to Macon, I didn't have my family to call to say, hey, how do you do this? And
Right.
then also feeling like the rules in Haiti are, when it comes to entrepreneurship, are different. Yeah. Like, we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just trying to figure it out thank God all our bills were paid. But, like, we were figuring it out, But also, as we were doing that, we realized that we needed to find a sense of community so that because we felt alone, right? And even for me, I wanted to find other women that look like me or any women at all, just to feel like, hey, to share similar stories as to persevere. So we found community in the ecosystem in Atlanta.
Yes.
So because we have clients here, we ended up joining a local co-working space, the Gathering Spot, and we would attend their events and things like that. And we found community being from South Florida, from one of the ecosystem builders in Miami called Felicia. She also had an organization. So we were just attending these events, trying to figure out what other people are doing. And what happened was we were like, we are driving a lot. And we realized that the people that look like us that were in the community as well, they were looking for the same. Yeah. So that's how we ended up creating Macon Black Tech.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and what I love is that, you guys see there was a gap in service, and I love that you call it an ecosystem because there's nothing more relevant than saying that business entrepreneurship is an ecosystem, because it really is, because it takes all of us working together and supporting each other and nurturing each other to rise up.
Yes.
And I think that that's so incredibly important. And so I love that you guys call it an ecosystem, because that is really telling about how important it is in the community to have something where you can grow and thrive. So that's incredible. So with Macon Black Tech, you have entrepreneurs that come to you and are looking for support. So what kind of support do you provide to them?
So when we just started with Macon Black Tech, we were just running a few events. We had networking events, we had virtual events. But what ended up happening as we were starting out, we had a vision. For example, that's how the Makeathon came about, right? We had a vision of providing a space where entrepreneurs can learn about how to develop ideas and how to do it in a space where the resources come to you, rather you seek them out, right, and then pitch them so that you can be in the ears of investors and things like that. I know that in a lot of different communities, like pitch days, demo days, they're accelerators, they're very common, but we don't really have that locally. So that's how we ended up starting the Makeathon. So with the Makeathon, what we did was we created a 3-month program where people could develop their ideas. We've had a lot of good classes, like class from Microsoft, from Google, in like founder stories. A lot of the things that we've implemented during the program were founder stories, because it's one thing to have an idea and want to pursue it, but sometimes when you're in a soil where everything is so new, it's hard to have it stick. It's hard to have it grow. So sometimes you just need that story that inspires you. And that's personal for me, because as I was building things out, like, I know we've talked earlier about being able to have conversations with male in the space. Like, I've had conversations with other founders in the space where they have that confidence. Because, even for me, one of the examples I'll share is, as I became a contractor, that's when I've really experienced imposter syndrome, right? So you probably read this already. I'm a full-blown introvert. So a lot of times I live in my head and I just show up and I have a thought in my head and I get it done. But other than that, you probably won't see me outside or anything like that. So for me, as I was working on Making Black Tech and Makeathon, although I've seen a lot of great spaces that I envisioned that Macon could look like, it was not quite there yet, right? And I feel like one thing that I equated to, not that I know any scriptures well, but I equated to the Noah's Ark, right? Because, he was building, I wish there was a woman version of the Noah's Ark. He was building and he looked foolish to a lot of people, but when it came, it made sense. And that's the same thing, right? As I was going in different spaces and talking about wanting to create a safe space for Black founders, people were like, what? What is a safe space? Like, y'all don't... Because also a little bit of background, Macon is 54% African American.
Okay.
But a lot of times we don't really see a lot of different environments where there's not much tech-enabled environment for founders of color.
I see.
You know? So wanting to build something, first, it's hard to sell the dream if people don't see the necessity for it.
Right.
So I have to believe in the dream myself to see it through.
Absolutely.
I've had the privilege to have these raw conversations with other ecosystem builders outside of my community that have really said, if no one can understand what you're doing, that means it needs to be done, so that has really motivated me to persevere.
I love it. I love it. So clarity of message is something that I think it becomes challenging, because you don't have to just sell the need for it, you have to sell the why, right?
Yes.
So it's one thing to say, this is why we need it and how I think it's going to improve everything, but this is also why it matters to you.
Yes.
Right? Because it's the why to you. Why does this matter to me?
Yes.
If you're trying to sell me something, I can understand, okay, that's a pretty good idea, but also, why do I care? You know? And so that is the challenging conversation to have, because you really have to understand somebody's motivation. And, how to get them involved in a conversation, especially when you're talking to somebody who is not a Black business owner, right? Because your conversation has to be, and this is why diversity matters. This is why you want people of color sitting at the table. This is why you want women sitting at the table. Because we can bring experiences and ideas from our own journeys that you may not be able to relate to, but I promise you it adds value.
Not only are we having ongoing conversations as to why that matters, like creating touch points, because a lot of times, even if you say it, it might fall on deaf ears now, but you have to show up for the idea. In the beginning, when I would be explaining why Making Black Tech was important or why is the Makeathon necessary, and it would fall on deaf ears, I would still show up and build, right? I still showed up and created a curriculum. I still showed up and build those relationships so that eventually, even if people might not understand it now, like little by little, they're understanding. And the good thing that's happened with that is now, like as soon as an opportunity shows up locally, I'm the first person they think about. Because they remember Christele spoke to them about this, right? So,
well, and consistency, right? Consistency and tenacity sometimes beat, talent all day long. And not that you lack talent, but the consistency and the tenacity, the I'm showing up because it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to keep showing up, and you can count on me being here next week too.
Yes.
I want you to remember me because I'm showing up for the people who matter to me.
Exactly.
And I think that more people need to do that for each other, especially in, whether it's a minority businesses showing up for each other or women-owned businesses showing up for each other. And I think that's where we are lacking support, is that we tend to feel like we're on an island by ourselves.
Yes, that's so true. You brought up a point that it made me remember my startup journey, right? So as a Haitian, as an islander or an immigrant, one of the things that had been instilled in me is hard work, right?
Yes.
So it was crazy moving and trying to connect to the community. I'm a hard worker. I work hard. Ain't no doubt about it. But it's funny because I had to quickly learn. One time I read this survey, the success pyramid or something like that. They were talking about working hard was at the bottom, but how people perceive you and how do you look to others is actually higher.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot what it's called. Maybe I need to look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really challenged me because, like I told you earlier, working hard, and as an introvert, I always believed in doing the hard work, and then it will show for it. But I got to a point where I was so frustrated because I was always being passed around, right? Yep. So it really challenged me to start developing relationships. So not only now I still work hard, but I also value building relationships is hard.
So let me ask you this, as an introvert and as a woman.
Yes.
How hard is it for you to step into your power and own your success?
Whew. I don't know about the owning your success part. Stepping into my power, I still struggle with that. And if I'm being honest with you, because navigating a lot of times spaces where, for example, even as current as the Makeathon, it's a pilot program, and we've been able to connect the right relationships to the platform. But a lot of times I'm overwhelmed because I'm scared, you know? But last year actually really challenged me, and I lost my grandmother.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. But when I lost my grandmother, that changed me, because growing up, going back to, I shared with you that my grandmother was an entrepreneur, but also she didn't know how to read and write. But but she actually owned land. She did a lot. She owned a lot of things. But I remember how much power she had in her community. Yeah. When she passed away, the whole, is it a state? I don't know how you transcribe that, where she was from mourned her.
Wow. So she had a legacy.
She had a legacy.
Wow.
And she's a short lady, but you don't want to mess with her. She's always brought so much power in the rooms that she's walked in. And growing up, I had been really shy, and I've often shrunk myself, right? And being in the space, like you talked about, being in a male-dominated space, and even not just male-dominated, also building something from scratch, having to translate as to why this is important within our community.
Right.
It's hard. So when she passed away, it kind of was, it flipped a switch for me to remind me that my legacy was bigger than I tapped into.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Well, and imagine her feelings, not knowing she could not read or write, knowing that she was an entrepreneur. Imagine how scared she was in a room, where she felt she had to portray confidence.
Yeah.
Because probably everything inside of her was afraid.
Yeah.
And felt less than because she couldn't read and write, and because entrepreneurialism was probably her only real path of success, of being able to put food on her table. So imagine being in her situation and feeling like you're walking in with a disadvantage and still having the strength to command a room and still leaving a legacy the way that she did. So kudos to her for the power that she was able to step into, even when I can guarantee you she was terrified at times.
Yeah, I mean, if she was terrified, I didn't know about it. I don't think any of us did, because she mustered a lot of confidence that I'm still learning how to walk into, because it gets challenged. Like, even the other day, we had one of the Makeathon sessions, and someone mentioned if you're pitching your idea to an investor or someone that you want to partner with, you're not going to say, hey, I'm here in Macon, I'm building this product, and hopefully you can support me. You're going to say, I'm building this organization that in 2025 it will support 1,000 minorities in the Middle Georgia area. And I think a lot of times I forget that I have to constantly switch it up. Yeah. And for me, it's not wrong. It's just for me to like constantly show up and remind myself that, hey, this is available to you. You have the power and authority to just walk into your full self. Yes. So that's available.
What gives you strength?
What gives me strength? That's a great question. What gives me strength? Okay, one of the things, because my work is community work, and in order to tackle community work, I think one of the first things that I did that I honor is going back to therapy.
Yes.
Because I do a lot of work that involves getting out of my comfort zone. A lot of times I get overwhelmed quickly, but being able to have my therapist and have vulnerable conversations, it's really helped me heal a lot of my childhood trauma, which in turn helps me show up with strength.
Well, I love that because, Brené Brown talks about vulnerability. Have you read her book?
I haven't, but I've heard her speak
her TED Talk. Yeah, her TED Talk is amazing. So I love her because for the longest time, I had a hard time being vulnerable. I really was. I felt like I always needed to be strong. I felt like I always needed to convey confidence, even if I was terrified. And listening to her is the first time I ever looked at vulnerability as strength.
Yes.
It's strength to be able to say, hey, I'm really struggling right now, and this is why. That is strength. That is bravery.
Yes.
And so having that bravery to say, I'm struggling, I need help, and to ask for help, or to say, I need advice, or whatever that looks like, to be able to do that, I no longer look at as weakness.
Totally. It's funny you say that because recently, last year, a few women showed up to me and said that one thing that they appreciated about me is I show up vulnerable through my leadership. And I didn't realize how powerful that was because for navigating a lot of spaces, a lot of times I've been asked to look differently, right? But, as an advantage of working hard to where I am today, like one of the gifts that gives is being able to show up as myself, right?
As your true authentic self.
Exactly. And I think that more than anything, I am grateful for the people that have showed up as themselves as well to empower me to show up as myself, because that right there, because I think navigating spaces where you don't feel safe, I often seek out people that I can talk to, and a lot of times it becomes challenging to just navigate spaces alone. So showing up vulnerable is showing up strong.
Absolutely. And that vulnerability allows people to approach you. You become more approachable. And when you are, what I realized is that my relationships now are much more authentic and strong because of the vulnerability. Because when I was showing up as strong all the time and I really didn't let anyone into that vulnerable side, people felt intimidated, like, well, she's got it all together. She can't possibly understand that I'm struggling and I don't want to share anything or look weak in front of her. And really what it did is the vulnerability allowed me to be a resource for them where they may not have come otherwise. And so whether it's employees, whether it's vendors, whether it's, whoever is in our lives, family members, you want to show up vulnerable and authentic because that's how you create deep relationships.
For sure. I definitely think for me, though, it took work.
Right.
Because growing up, culturally speaking, I was taught that was a sign of weakness.
Right.
So having to unlearn that has been very hard.
Right. I understand.
But yet filled with reward.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to 18-year-old you setting out on a journey and, kind of getting that first step into a career?
I think for my 18-year-old self, the best advice I would give her is to relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think like the pressure of having to show up a certain way and not feeling good enough because of what I was taught, you know, I spent a lot of times trying to be perfect, you know, and even with that came as I started going back to therapy, I realized that I was apologizing all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the advice I would give to my 18-year-old self is to be okay with being a student of learning instead of rushing the process of having to figure it out all fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we do that a lot as women. We apologize constantly. You know, I lead a women's small group for my church. And, you know, sometimes when the ladies will speak in the group, she's like, I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time. I'm sorry if I'm like, stop apologizing. Stop.
Yeah.
We do that. We're afraid of taking up too much space.
Yes.
Right? Like we're afraid that, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to judge us? Do they think less of us? Are we taking up too much space?
Yes.
Because we're taught to be small, right?
Yes.
We're taught to minimize. We're taught to, you know, kind of share all the accolades. We don't have to own our success. And, you know, I think it's interesting because when I said, you know, how are you about stepping into your power and owning your success? And you're like, well, I don't know about owning my success. You are the 2021 Young Business Person of the Year. You dominated that space. You should own that success because you really are accomplished. And I think as women, we're like, well, I mean, I do okay. And I think that that's a normal female response.
Yeah. And I think for me too, it was more, like you said, I didn't really take time to grasp it.
Right.
Because like the awards that I won last year, right after the award, I had to travel. Right after the award, I had to do something. And then because I'm always doing something, I never stand still, you know, and I don't want to do that anymore. So yeah, like that's when I said that I realized that things are so rushed because I'm always thinking about step 100, right? Rather than focusing on today. I never fully internalized the things that happened today. But I do want to do a better job at that.
Yeah. Well, I think when we own our success, we're able to better convey the importance of it to other women.
Yes.
And so many times we give away our power.
Totally.
We give away our power to our husband, to our team, to our community. Well, it's because the community did this. It's because my partner did that. It's because, you know, we share our power, or we lift up other people, you know, so that we can minimize our own relevance.
Yes.
And so I think as women, that's one thing that we do to ourselves. And that's where our question of, you know, do we deserve a seat at the table? We do deserve a seat at the table. We just have to step into that. We have to step into it and own it and say, this is why I deserve to be here. And we're really bad at that as women.
I know I am, because it's so funny because I usually invite myself to the table.
Sure.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
But when I get there, I'm not able to be fully present because that's when I start having those inward conversations.
Right.
You know, and so that is annulling me finding my strength to just show up to the table.
Right.
So having to have those healthy inward conversations where you're here now, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
You took the position, show me what you can do. And it is a struggle. And it's something that I think, and especially being introverted, you're probably in a position where you're like, should I say anything? And then you talk yourself out of it.
Yes.
Right? You'll talk yourself out of speaking up. And I totally understand that. And even though I am more extroverted, I find myself doing the same thing because I'll start saying, nothing I have to say matters. You know, nothing I have to say really matters. Nobody really cares. You know, are they going to think I'm, you know, not smart enough if I say this? Are they going to judge me? And so you want to be part of the conversation, but we have to teach ourselves that it's okay to speak up and say what we want to say.
Definitely. And also like creating room for others to do the same too. Because what I'm grateful for in the work that we do through the community organization is seeing it's so humbling and beautiful in the sense of when you see a person imitating what you once worked through, you know, to let them know, like, look, I don't want you to apologize anymore. I need you to be okay with what you're sharing. Because so many times, and I think that's part of the ripple effect, right? Because we dream of creating safe spaces. We dream of eliminating barriers for women, for people that we feel like need to be part of a change. It takes work every day, right? But to be part of that lesson, so that's why I also believe that there's twofold. The first fold is to work on self, because I can't really give you if I am not really preparing myself to show up to do the same. And also, as I'm working on myself and unlearning these things, I also want to create that room for people that are in the space that I work on and to do the same.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, I love that you're creating, you know, when you call it a safe space, it really is that. It's a safe space to be who you are, authentically, vulnerably you, and supporting people in that role.
Yes.
And so that's really important. I want to talk and ask you a little bit about, you know, you were talking about doing the Makeathon, and is part of that fundraising and investors, because being a woman and being a Black woman, you have probably one of the biggest hurdles in getting financing and getting investors to pay attention. How do you overcome that?
That's a great question. Because not only that, okay, so doing what I do also, because I do a lot, time is limited.
Right.
So as I make a decision to fundraise, I have to also consider what is also not getting done, like opportunity costs, right? Like
Sure.
you get something done at the cost of something else not getting done. Sacrifices, yeah. So, and also ego.
Yeah.
Because, you know, all these no's, they don't feel good.
No.
But yeah, I think for me, what's really been helpful, although as I fundraise, I get a lot of no's, being part of communities, like I'm part of this organization called the Black Innovation Alliance, which is a lot of other entrepreneur supporting organizations together, forming one organization. We help each other.
Wow.
You know,
That's amazing.
like, yeah. So being part of, and that's, I'm also part of other communities that do the same. So pretty much finding my community. And during the pandemic made the earth flat.
Yes.
You know, as to like people that would never come to Macon, now I can just like reach out to them virtually, right?
Yeah.
So being able to have access to information, talking to other people that might have gotten a grant from someone that I didn't get from, and I can ask them, hey, what did you do that was different?
Yeah.
You know, so finding those spaces, because I know fundraising within itself can be very hard, but one of the things that has helped me is a lot of people feel like how I feel, like automatically feel like there's a barrier to fundraising. But building relationships with people that are offering funding has helped me to know what has worked, so that way next time I can do better.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. So last question. What do you want people to know? What do you wish people knew?
Overall?
What do you wish people knew? Yeah, you can answer it however you want.
All right. So one of my favorite mantras that I live my life by is you have everything that you need to create impact. And that looks different for everyone. So for me, like when I was starting out making Black Tech with no funding, I bootstrapped. What that meant was we were working HamTECH and putting the money towards making Black Tech. And also another thing that I did was use my relationships.
Yes.
You know, having social capital is so important.
Yes.
So instead of, and the way that we frame our questions are important. Instead of saying that we can't do something, asking ourselves, what can we do with what we have? And that's what's carried me on ever since I was a little girl.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I agree. We do have all the resources we need, and I think we're really good at making excuses for why we can't get started, but really, truly, the first step is the hardest.
Yeah,
if we can just get through it, the journey takes us, right?
Definitely.
Like the doors open as long as we're willing to walk.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
I love that. Well, thank you so
Thank you
much.
for
Thank you,
having
Christele, for
me.
joining us today.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed your story. I'm
Thank
super excited about Making Black Tech. I think you guys are going to be doing amazing things
Thank
for
you.
so many entrepreneurs. And definitely Godspeed to everything that you're doing, because I think you are incredible and you are only getting started on your journey. So
Thank
I
you.
see a lot of great things happening. So
Thank you so much, Angela. I am wishing you much success
Thank
in this
you.
new journey. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to hearing what the other episodes will be like, because we all need a space like this.
We do. And I think it's about time. And I think this is not just for women, it's for men too.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it really is just a conversation of, you know, how can we really honor those who are doing what women have set out to do. And, you know, they've been doing it for so long without recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And once we start recognizing them, maybe it brings the conversation closer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it becomes something where we start seeing the importance of having women at the table and in a conversation when it comes to technology and innovation
Mm-hmm.
and things that you're doing with the community, because I think that's where really it all starts, is making sure that our community and the business leaders hear our voices.
Definitely.
And so as long as we can start there, we have a long way to go, but it's going to be amazing. So thank you.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much.
So thanks for everything. God did not bless us with this new day so that we can be mediocre. So let's go make the most out of it. So let's go be amazing.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll catch you in the next episode.